Hello, everyone. Today I want to talk about a question that sometimes plagues me. Is this piece finished? Disclaimer again, I'm a painter, but most of what I'm saying can be applied to just about any creative discipline. Now, this question has a way of looming over some pieces, reminding us that at virtually any point we can just stop and call it done. For some pieces and for some people, maybe this is more of a problem than for others. I like to visualize it as a sliding scale going from an easy piece to finish to a difficult piece to finish, and the clarity of your piece's internal criteria, meaning its own set of standards independent of outside influence, has a lot to do with where it lands on this scale. If your criteria is more clear, then it stands to reason that your piece is going to be easier to finish because you understand what it needs. If you can make the criteria of your entire body of work more clear, every single piece that you work on is probably going to be easier to finish as well. If your criteria is unclear, of course it's going to be harder. Maybe it's unclear because we just don't know yet, in which case some criteria sleuth work can be pretty helpful, or maybe something about it is just inherently resistant to criteria. We'll get to that in a minute. I have always found that making my work more clear is a great way to figure out how to finish it. Easier said than done, of course, but let's break it down. Pieces finished well and with intention, like this Van Gogh bedroom painting, truly show it, because their internal criteria is very clear. For both Van Gogh and for us, digging deeper into the internal criteria of our work involves some art analysis. This is something that art historians, critics, academics, and various other writers on art utilize to great effect. But it is also an extremely useful tool that we as artists can use to better understand our own work. And to that end, I think it is sometimes underutilized and underappreciated. In super simple terms, this just means taking, like we just did with Van Gogh, quick inventory of the visual elements of a piece, and then letting the relationships between those visual elements bounce around in your brain and create associations. Side note, it is really important to let them bounce around long enough. We might be surprised by what our brains come up with after they're allowed to cook for a bit. One great analogy that I've heard is to imagine that you were sitting in the forest looking at a pile of sticks. This is something that in one way or another all of us have done, just looked at something like a pile of sticks that doesn't really have any meaning necessarily, but as you stare at it, your brain starts to have a dialogue with itself, because part of you is remaining intent on these sticks, and another part of you is saying, why are we looking at these sticks? The part of you that's saying why is trying to get an answer, and so it will begin to come up with associations, and you might see a triangle that looks like a piece of pizza. You might see another shape that reminds you of your great aunt. The more you stare, the more your brain starts to cook, or just assign random meaning to things. When associations start popping up, we may find some to be more useful than others, and different people are inevitably going to have different associations. But when I list out the ones that seem the most important to me, either because they are the most in or the most out of alignment with what I intend for the piece to do, looking to emphasize my favorite associations and minimize or completely eliminate the ones that don't work for me often helps me figure out how to finish a stubborn piece. This is a painting that gave me some trouble. I liked it well enough, even though it felt clearly unfinished, and I wanted to preserve the fresh feeling it had. So it ended up hanging on my wall semi-forgotten for a long time. Recently, however, I resolved to finish it. Here, I let go of the vague tent thing at the bottom in favor of a familiar circular pit motif that I've used many times. For a while, I was kind of just painting on instinct, trying to preserve the general feeling of the piece as I let myself experiment. And I ended up here. There are a lot of things I liked about this version, especially because it still felt fresh. But the composition bothered me, particularly the tension in the center between these concrete gates and this magical alien seed pod plant. I thought it looked like I had skimped out on the size of the plant to avoid overlapping with the gates. which was true. So instead of addressing the plant, I naturally decided I didn't like the color of the sky and made it much, much lighter and bigger. I thought maybe the tension I was talking about would be less of a problem if I made the gates play a smaller overall role in the piece. And I think it did help a little, but it still felt unfinished. The sky felt too white, and I wanted a lot more greenery. So we ended up here, where it sat for a month or two, including during the filming of my last video. But it wasn't lush enough, and the plant still felt problematic. I was having a hard time pinning down the internal criteria of this one because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted the piece to do, what the piece wanted. And it wasn't until I went back to the basics, essentially, and applied some art analysis to it that I figured out what I needed to do. This one is relatively simple, despite some intentional ambiguity. In my mind, we have a sky, grass, trees, concrete gates that create a clear division of space, a mystical shadow moon, and the alien seed pod plant. Explaining my specific relationship to each of these elements would require a whole different video, but suffice to say that the plant ended up being the odd thing out. And because it was basically the focus of the whole painting, and it was creating that tension issue, it had to go. In painting it away, the circular pit motif underneath did right what it was supposed to do when I originally put it there, though it was now greener and more subtle than the first iteration. A few more leaves, and things felt right. Importantly, this is a piece that I could have stopped working on at so many different points, and earlier versions of it had elements that were probably better. But I now feel I can call it finished because it has two specific things. Number one, it feels fully cooked, visually. Maybe a little overcooked even, but I will definitely take that from a piece like this. Number two, the visual elements generally convey what I want them to when they are identified and their relationships are examined more closely. Basically, it stands up to my own art analysis. And so even if it's not my favorite painting, I can call it done. And I'm gonna leave it alone. But there's still something about it that pulls at me. It could be that it has been almost finished in various states for over a year, and I'm having trouble letting it rest. But on the far outside chance that a thunderstroke of revelation hits me and I suddenly think of something that would make it much better, I'm quietly reserving the right to
make one more change.
Calling a piece finished can be vexing. Through the years, a lot of them are never really finished. We just kind of abandon them as we get distracted and begin working on something else, or just decide,
I don't know what to do with this one anymore.
Whether or not those are actually finished is subject to interpretation, certainly. The point is, sometimes where I ended up is more interesting than where I decided enough is enough. So I try not to be afraid of continuing something unfinished, even if I don't want to touch it. Now, this is all great, but it doesn't always give me answers enough for me to finish something. And sometimes we might be working on something inherently criteria resistant, like maybe choreography guidelines for a heavily improvised interpretive dance, or a completely non-representational painting, or anything else that might be conceptually squirrely. If some self-art analysis doesn't quite give you the answers you need to finish something, and if you haven't consciously done this already,
trust your gut.
See what that's telling you. If you find that you can point some analysis at that, wonderful. But if not, you may just be a deeply intuition-oriented person, which is certainly not uncommon amongst artists. And in that case, your gut is probably pretty good. Stare at it for a long time if you need to. If you get a feeling, I say roll with it. But if all else fails and you're at a loss, I have a couple of things you might be able to try. I've been there. I'll probably be back there again tomorrow.
Honestly.
Number one, as I have done with this one, call it finished on probation. Let your brain process over time. Just put it somewhere where you will see it. Hang it up in your house for a while.
Think about it.
See how you feel.
I have found that when I do this, I gradually start leaning toward being more or less okay with the idea of it being finished. And once I notice a clear trend in one direction or another, then I have my answer. If number one doesn't work, or if you're really frustrated with this piece, maybe
Try giving it space for a while.
put it away for a long time if you have to. Older you might have a different take on it, who knows. And the final resort, which sounds scary, but it's actually not, let it go. Don't be afraid to just completely destroy something and start over. If you got to this point, you can get here again. And next time you do, you will be better at avoiding whatever pitfalls got you stuck. So if you find yourself having trouble finishing a piece, I hope this video was helpful. You can do this. And remember, don't be afraid to start over, give it space, try something else. You can do this. I know you can. You've got this. I believe in you.